Hello, welcome to this week's economy. I'm your host, Dr. Vance, Ginn. Thank you for joining me again today. It's really a pleasure to have you with me, and we've got a lot to talk about. I'm actually on vacation right now, which is great, and we're in Orlando having some good time. But I'm recording this on August 3rd, 2023, so that way you wouldn't miss an episode. That we continue to talk together, have some good discussion, and let people prosper, right? So we got a lot to talk about. If you missed the Let People Prosper episode this week, I hope that you'll go back and listen to it. It was with Daniel Turner from Power of the Future. Great discussion about the green energy flawed agenda and how it's going to basically bankrupt and make the country worse off over time if we continue to head down this route. And so be sure to check that one out. The upcoming Let People Prosper episode is going to be with Nick Horton from Opportunity Arkansas. We talk a lot about healthcare policy and Medicaid, but also what's going on in Arkansas. What are some of the changes with school choice and things happening? So don't miss that episode as well. Also, be sure to subscribe to my newsletter at vanceginn.substack.com, along with wherever you get your podcast, whether it's YouTube or Apple or Google, wherever it's at, Audible. Go ahead and subscribe there so that way you get it each and every time these come out. And so I hope that you've been enjoying these. Please provide feedback along the way and share it with your friends and family. That'll help me out a lot. So today what I really want to talk about, though, is a tribute to Milton Friedman. On July 31st would have been his 111th birthday, if he hadn't died in 2006. Milton Friedman is one of my favorite economists, probably my favorite economist. Just the way that he was able to present things, I think was able to do it in a way that people could understand it, but doing it from a high level, but also to the average day person. Right? Being able to talk about it. I try to do that. I'm not sure that I do it well all the time, but I'm continuing to work on it to get to that point. And Milton Friedman had a big influence on my ideas, my classical liberalism, where I come from, and my more free market ideas on the economy. I remember the person who really got me interested in this was my mentor at Texas Tech University, where I got my bachelor's degree and PhD in economics, was Dr. Ronald Gilbert. And Dr. Gilbert was someone who I had an intermediate macro, and I remember I would go and talk to him after each class, and he would give me a lot of insights about what's going on in the economy and just how to think like an economist is really where I learned it from. But I remember after one of the classes, he said, "Hey, you got to read this book." And the book was Capitalism and Freedom. And if you haven't read that yet, I really urge you to go ahead and go do that. I think you'll enjoy it. It has a lot of good insights. It is a bit technical, but not really. It's more of a philosophical type of book on the economy. There aren't any equations or graphs or anything like that, so don't get scared away from that. But that was one that really started to open my eyes up to classical liberalism way of thinking in the free market economy and how you should get government out of the way. There are rules for government, but they're very limited. I also would recommend, if you don't want that one that's a little bit more dense, is Free to Choose, that Milton Friedman wrote with his wife, Rose Friedman, who was also a PhD economist. They met at the University of Chicago. Unfortunately, Milton Friedman, he was in his 90s, but he passed away in 2006. I still remember that day when that happened. I was doing a congressional internship in Washington, D.C. with a congressman, and I really remember that, quite well whenever that happened. And I think that that's how much influence that he had on my life, even though I never met him. And I think that that's one reason why I wanted to provide this episode on this week's economy, to just go through a little bit about what he said and did. I recently wrote a little rap, so I thought that might be kind of fun to get us started here today. And then I want to go through some of the quotes that he said along the way. So here we go. Today is Milton Friedman's birthday. He advocated for expanded liberty, no freedom without free markets, resulting in prosperity with limited governments. His ideas took a while to deliver, but he changed the game forever. And so that's really kind of encapsulates a lot of how I think about him, what his ideas were. And I really do think he changed the game forever. When you think about what he was writing, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and so forth. And you think about how he won the Nobel Prize in the 70s, a great Nobel Prize speech on basically the Phillips curve and why it doesn't last anymore. There's not this trade-off between unemployment rates where you have the natural rate of unemployment is what he talked about. But he really changed the game in the sense of how people talked about it. With Ronald Reagan, with Margaret Thatcher, yes, they also listened to a lot of what Hayek was saying and had been writing. And I think Hayek is another one of my favorite economists, probably number two. But he's a little more dense. He doesn't have the same sort of way of talking about these issues like Milton Friedman did. He was also not a native-born speaker of English, right? I mean, he was Vienna and German, and that was his native language. And so that also had some It hindered him a little bit for Hayek, but Milton Friedman learned. I mean, they worked together and for a number of years, and so there were a lot of things that were happening. Just a couple of quotes from him. One is, underlying most arguments against the free market is a lack of belief in freedom itself. Milton Friedman. I think that's another one of his key quotes that he said that I really believe today. There's a lot of people who are downgrading free markets, downgrading free enterprise, and I think it's a lack of freedom itself for free people. Because look, if you don't want free markets, you don't want free people. You got to have more control. That's socialism, communism, fascism. That's really leads. And so that's why I'm concerned by some of those who are saying it's the old right that we're free markets. We're the new right, where we're coming up with new government ideas and we know the way. If we just had the right people in charge, I say, no, that's going to lead into despair. That's going to lead to more control, more government, and not a good direction to go, which is why I joined this principles of freedom conservatism. I'm a classical liberal overall, but I mean, I think that's a better way to go. Another key thing that I believe that he said, which is important for us today, is that, me being a Christian, maybe many of you are Christians, some would say the free market doesn't really provide about morality or anything else, and that's why we need more government influence in our lives. I don't think that's the case. I think that free markets allow for that, and capitalism allows for that because it allows for people to have freedom of views and freedom of exchanging, and not only in goods and services, but also in ideas. And that's really matter. If you have too much top-down control by government over religion or other things, that's where you get more power and where we've seen throughout human history. But this is his quote. Milton Friedman said, "Why have we had such a decline in moral climate? I submit to you that a major factor has been a change in the philosophy which has been dominant, a change from belief in individual responsibility to belief in social responsibility. If you adopt the view that a man is not responsible for his own behavior, then somehow society is responsible. Why should he seek to make his behavior good? In short, incentives matter, right? And in the marketplace, we have a lot of trust. And exchanging in a form of capitalism, free market capitalism, that's what you get to happen. Is morality is bred throughout that system, along with what I hope is the Bible and people reading and learning about Jesus Christ and things of that nature and becoming Christians. That would be great. That's ideal. But in this system, there's also a lot of things that we should take away from that are really good for humanity. Milton Friedman had on his license plate MVPY, which is basically his equation of exchange that he talked a lot about. He used for a lot of his economics as the measure of how to measure an economy based on money supply and velocity equals price times real GDP. And that was different than the Keynesian view of consumption plus government spending plus net exports plus investment, because that's all spending side. And really, this was talking more about the supply and demand and how all these things came together. And I think that was quite fascinating that he had that sort of, that he wanted to have that license plate with that on there. So a couple more quotes and we'll finish this off. A society that puts equality before freedom will get neither. A society that puts freedom before equality will get a high degree of both. This is one of my favorite quotes that he said. One of the great mistakes is to judge policies and programs by their intentions rather than their results. I know I talk about that often, but I think that's so important. We also know that he said there's no such thing as a free lunch. And that was another key one that always sticks with me. He also said nothing is so permanent as a temporary government program. How true is that? If you make something temporary by government, they just want to add more to it, make it permanent, increase spending on it, whether it's working or not. Education spending will most effective if it relies on parental choice and private initiative, the building blocks of success throughout our society. I mean, I think that's one of the key things that he'd be probably so happy about today is this school choice revolution that's happening across the states, which I hope will continue. Milton Friedman didn't necessarily start that, but he really popularized it, talked about it a lot on the economic freedom and school choice and the importance of that freedom to have that overall. Another quote, many people want the government to protect the consumer. A much more urgent problem is to protect the consumer from the government. That is so important as well. Just had a paper out with the Pelican Institute recently on antitrust enforcement and the blatant disregard for competition, where they think that government can come in and help people and control the market and things of that nature. And that just doesn't work. Again, that leads to control, not free people, not free markets, and it's not a good direction for the country. And I think that's so important because consumers, right, should be protected. And that means the marketplace in general, and protect the consumer from the government, because the government gets too big, causes tyranny. We don't need that. And so I think that's another key part here. And here, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. Inflation is caused by too much money chasing too few goods. And we've seen that here recently. We've seen the excessive government spending and everything else that goes in. And so I just wanted to make this tribute to Milton Friedman. I appreciate all that he's done. I hope that I can do some of the things that he was able to do along the way, while also helping people prosper and finding ways to shrink government, give people more liberty and everything else. You can watch a lot of his videos also on YouTube from his old speeches. I still go back and watch those. So make sure to check those out. And I'll put some of these in the show notes page again at vanceginn.substack.com. You can also look at my website, vanceginn.com. If you're also interested in helping fund some of this, as this does take time and effort and money, you can also provide some funding there as well. So without anything else going on, I hope you have a wonderful day. And until next time, let people prosper.